Okay, a very good evening to all. Welcome to the 2 days international webinar on interdisciplinary research on the COVID-19 pandemic, organized by the Research and Consultancy Cell of Government Changbana College. I am Dr. Lalbiak Zwali, the IQAC coordinator, and a very special greeting to our keynote speaker, Reverend Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau, and to our dear principal, Lalsangkima Pachuau, to the subject experts, to the presenters, to the faculty, and all the participants in this two-day program. A brief background of the researches that has been that are to be presented in this webinar. This is a show of the government Changbana College togetherness. We wanted to do something for the COVID-19 pandemic, the overwhelming pandemic that has swept across the globe, and even in remote places like Mizoram, and even our very own college. So in order to have an understanding, we have given an interdisciplinary research, and that has taken the efforts of not only the faculty, but the students as well. So I am so proud to finally have this webinar and eventually the book release for the researchers. And I wish the very best to all the presenters and to the keynote speaker as well for tonight. And I have such a privilege to introduce the keynote speaker for tonight, Reverend Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau. He is the John Wesley Besant Professor of Christian Mission and Dean of Advanced Research Programs at the Ashbury Theological Seminary, USA. He completed his BA Nehu in 1984. He did his BD in Serampore College and in 1989. And something very noteworthy is that he bagged all the awards that was offered by the Serampore University. That is very wonderful to know. And he did his master's in theology as well as his doctorate in Princeton Theological Seminary. He is the only non-American holder of the John Wesley Besant Professorship, which is a highly esteemed and privileged title held only by a very few. His area of expertise is world Christianity, missiology, social and religious movement in South Asia, and contextual and intercultural theologies. And sir, he is our very own Miso, and that makes it so wonderful. And from what I hear from someone that is very close to you, sir, he said that ani hitsu at hokrima at hilti tur hitsu at puitling turin at trang chin at the Jenny. So we are so glad to have you here as our keynote speaker and to listen and learn from your expertise. And now, sir, I invite you, Reverend Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau. Unmute ngay. Alay in mute lang, sir. Adikto eh.
Okay, well, a very good evening to you all from a rather dreary and wet morning here in the beautiful state of Kentucky. I am in central part of Kentucky in a small town. At least two of you have visited in Wilmore, Kentucky, and I am glad for this opportunity to be with you. And for the sake of the time, I will try to be as brief as possible. I'm happy to see such an important interdisciplinary reflections on the global pandemic that you have made, and especially to bring out a volume that is dealing with this pandemic, global pandemic from different disciplines. And I can see the reflections, and I have seen a bit of the book, and I'm very, very glad about it. Let me just say congratulations to Government Rangbana College for producing and for organizing this very event and producing such an important volume. I will be trying to share my screen with you from time to time, yeah, the host will have to allow me to share the screen from time to time. Okay. The topic that comes to my mind as I am thinking about this is how COVID-19 has been approached and even reflected or even responded from different global cultural values. And I am thinking of kind of comparing, because this is a brief time and it will have to be generalized, and also to some extent a rather superficial reflections. In the COVID pandemic, humanity appears to be facing a power larger than itself. And we all know that. For more than a year, the global society of humankind has not come up with a device, a system, a mechanism, or a medicine to defeat this virus we now dearly call coronavirus. The latest approach is to manage it instead of instant elimination of it. We learn to live with it. And I think especially today, it is now clear in Western Europe and the United States also that instead of trying to eliminate it, we are trying now to live with it, even at a very costly and dearly payment that we have to pay. What I found interesting is how responses to COVID have been shaped by cultural values of communities around the world. In some ways, the COVID pandemic reveals the core of our culture and cultural values, as it touches the very core of our social beings. More than anything, COVID pandemic challenged us as social beings. It really rocked our own social identity and our very social selfhood. That's what I'm planning to share with you a bit here. For this brief purpose, let me broadly identify kind of three main responses to COVID by relevant cultural groups. And if I can share, well, I cannot share it at this point. Okay, I think I can go without this. And these three cultural groups that I will broadly be looking at are, number one, I mean, these are related to the Miso communities in some way, I thought. Number one, post-Enlightenment, rationalist Western society whose cultural values have been driven by rationalism and individual freedom. Keep those two aspects in mind. Rationalism and individual freedom, they're related. Number two is what I would call the Confucianist culture of social relationality of East Asia. By this, I'm going to be referring to more of the East Asian culture to which we are a part. We are in between Southern Asia, the culture of the Brahminic Indic India, and the East Asian Confucianist-driven relationally driven culture. And the third one, which I would only include it, but would not be reflecting a lot on this, would be the Indic India or the Brahminic culture, which is communally structured system in South Asia. Note that I have not included such cultures as African or Middle East or Eastern Europe. And these three that I am identifying are just for the sake of our reflection as Misos, because we are related in some ways to them. So coming first to the post-Enlightenment rationalist Western society, despite the fact that coronavirus spread from Asia, or everyone now, at least, of course, China has been denying in some way from Wuhan region in China, in central China, and spread from there to Asia. And then the epicenter, however, of this pandemic soon became the West, especially the United States. I remember in the early days, a warning that was given from CDC and saying, well, it could take as many lives as 100 and even 200,000 lives. We all know by now we are counting more than 600,000 lives being taken. Two major characteristics of the post-Enlightenment West that I have kind of identified are individual freedom and rationalism, which I have been thinking played opposite roles in this pandemic, interestingly. No doubt it was the reason-based scientific system that helped even to find a vaccine. And now the most effective treatment of the pandemic, of the infection is what we now call the monoclonal antibodies, quite expensive. Now in the US, people who do not like to take vaccine often rely on this for their treatment. The famous one, of course, was when President Donald Trump was infected. He was treated with monoclonal antibodies, and which was quite effective. On the other hand, the human freedom, which is also the seedbed of that rationalist scientism, became the main reason for the West's suffering of the pandemic. I'll say that a little bit more. Western Enlightenment is about rationalism. It's about free-flowing human thoughts and ideas, and the belief in the high capability of unrestricted human mind, a liberated human rationality, the reasoning power of humanity or the humankind is the foundation for the Western modern development founded in the principle of the Enlightenment tradition. That has become the foundation, like we said, of modernity, as well as modernization itself of the global society. The world as we know it today has been brought into being or developed to what it is by this freeing of the human mind in the Enlightenment philosophy, the philosophy of the individual autonomy spearheaded in the Enlightened movement in the West. The modern and the postmodern West became what it is largely through this philosophy of individual freedom, its teachings and belief in the power of the free humankind. From its scientific empiricism, such as found in Baconian empirical philosophy, to industrial and post-industrial revolutions, what's essential for the revolutionary development of the West? that led to that led the rest of the world is human freedom, the freedom of the human mind, where the human rationality power is embedded. So it is in freedom. You have learned of all the stories about Galileo or others who struggle with the feudal system in the past and the hierarchical system of society that they embattled for the freeing of the human mind and the human rationality. However, while this has become the reason for the success of the civilization, as well as in this very pandemic, for the very finding of the scientific finding of the vaccine that we are now celebrating, while it is so, however, the politicization of the human individual freedom has also become the most favorable for the coronavirus to spread in the West, and especially here in the United States, killing thousands of people. Vaccine has become a political thing. Even wearing of masks has been politicized. And it is in the argument that mask itself is mandating mask or mandating the vaccine themselves are being politicized as against human freedom. Well, let me come to the Asian side of it. On the other hand, a much more restrictive, socially amenable communities of Asia, in my opinion, largely influenced by Confucius' philosophy of relationality, has been doing quite well. The social amenability of Asians, especially East Asian, is based on, as well as produce, a culture of honor and shame, a culture characterized by high regard for social honor and a fierce fear for social shame or social ostracism. In Miso, we often say, Zatlak. Zatlak became a moral issue. It's not so much what is right or wrong that we often talk about. It is a Zatlak or not Zatlak, as we call it. And then the behavior and the system that we valorize are honored in society from Tlomngai now all the way down. Just as, let's say, the Japanese or the Chinese in the culture, the honor given in society to a good name. Very often we are accused of worshiping honor, honorable names in Asia. And those are the two sides, a culture characterized by high regard for social honor and fierce fear for social ostracism. The high regard for honor and fear of being socially shamed drive much of East Asian societies to which we are a part. And I tend to relate that with the Confucius philosophy of relationality. When coronavirus pandemic hit us, it was the social response as against individual resistance that has made Asian societies to do relatively better than the West. Social obedience, as I'd call it, characterizes our societies largely. And that aspect of our distinct cultural values, in my opinion, has saved much life in this pandemic. In Mizoram, we are experiencing what I would call the mystery of COVID. despite the fact that as a society, we have been united. We have done so well. I cannot think of any other society doing as good as the Mizo society. Yet the mystery is because we're so socially bonded, and that the virus is taking advantage of that too. From the lockdown of Wuhan, the birthplace of coronavirus, as we call it, to the Korean response, swift Korean response, the Taiwanese government careful response, and in Singapore, we have seen that all these are done on the basis of our value that I would call social amenability, deeply rooted in our system. Quite different from East Asian social relationship communities is a rather much hierarchically structured caste community system in Indic India. But because of the communal nature, it does respond slightly differently. The Brahminic culture sells several social amenability that we just talk about of other Asians, but it is quite different. The communities are ranked hierarchically based on purity and pollution beliefs. Deep inside, you see characters of caste system, which is driven by pollution, that is the outcast, the low caste. You are low caste because you're polluted, or purity because you are purified and your purity makes you in the higher caste. And the characters of these I saw revealed in some way in the pandemic too. For instance, at one point, healthcare workers were treated as if they were polluted by the virus badly. And that was kind of distinct, I thought. Despite the relatively good social resistance of coronavirus in Asia, I would also add that our very social amenability could be seen as a factor against the creative use of our mind. The vying for social honor and the fearing of social shame may have also prevent us in the larger context of the human society from utilizing the power of the human mind, the human rationality, and the human reasoning power. Asia is dependent so much on Western discoveries in modern times. Why? In some way, I felt in the light of these pandemic responses, we are being prevented to use the best of our human reasoning power by the social restrictions, by the social, how can I say this, by the social values that we hold dearly. Well, to be brief, like I said, I'm trying to be as brief as possible, as I have promised my brother, not to be to take more than 20 minutes. I said I might have already taken that. What's the outcome of all these from my observation of the social systems and cultural behaviors of Western and Asian societies? Can social amenability and individual creativity of the mind, the power of human reasoning power, be brought together? Can the spiritually driven religiosity that we hold dearly be brought together, as tense as it may be, with the freedom of the mind to bring out the best in the human being that we seem to be seeing in the post-Enlightenment Western society? Can Asians continue their cultural values in their competition for scientism? Can they be as productive a discoverer as Westerners have been while holding to their social honor? These are things we may like to experiment in the post-COVID society, Asian society. I often thought of the Asian values in the United States or in the West today. After the turn of the millennium, a large number of Asians have come to the West, and especially in the United States. Between the time I studied here in the early 1990s and to the present, things have changed dramatically. And today we have the first female vice president of an Indian descent. And we have carved out our role, our place here. Is it in the context of this free-flowing thought that these Asian migrants are taking advantage of in making such a great success even in the West today? I know these points are generalized and there may be many questions when laid in their specificities. Yet I think there is truth in this generalized observation. And I believe that there are lessons and food for thoughts. So this brief sharing, thanks for the opportunity. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. That was really insightful. I, for one, am personally very enriched by what you have said about your in-depth knowledge of cultural studies and about the differences. Makes us think. Even there are so many for potentials for further studies in what you have said, a motivation to look into further researches on cultures and the whole gamut of the effect of COVID pandemic. I wish that there was time for us all to comment on what you have said, but because of the paucity of time, we shall go straight away to the presentation. Thank you once again, sir. And now, thank you. Now we go on to the presentation part of the webinar. We shall first call on the Public Administration Department, and the presentation will be done by Dr. Lalsangkima Pachuau. Pachuau, kan ba tambe? I'm also a Pachuau. And it will be for 15 minutes, and we have a 3 minutes reflection comment, expert comment after that. So I now call on the Department of Public Administration to have their presentation.
A very good evening to our respected principal, our esteemed guest, Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau, the subject experts, my colleagues, and to all the participants. My name is Dr. Lalsangkima Pachuau, and on behalf of the Department of Public Administration, I'll be presenting the research paper. And the paper is entitled "The Working of the Department of Disaster Management and Rehabilitation in relation to COVID-19 pandemic with special reference to Aizawl district." And tonight I'll be presenting the objectives of the study, major findings of the study, and then factors for the low rate COVID deaths in Mizoram, and problems and challenges faced, and recommendation. So if the host may allow me to present my slide. The working of the Department of Disaster Management and Rehabilitation in relation to COVID-19 pandemic, with special reference to Aizawl district. The objectives of the study include the achievements and the failures of the departments since the onset of the pandemic, and to study the factors responsible for the low rate COVID-19 deaths in Mizoram, to analyze the relationship between the Department of Disaster Management and the Health and Family Welfare Department and the law enforcement units. And it also includes examining the contribution of the NGOs, community-based organizations, and the general public in prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery strategies of COVID-19, to find out if the department receives adequate financial support from the government and if it has enhanced the capacity in COVID-19 management. And finally, to assess the overall preparation of the Department of Disaster Management for the impending COVID-19 third wave. And now we will move to the major findings of the study. Implementation of plans and policies. The study reveals that 85.7% of the plans and policies of the department have been carried out promptly and effectively, while 14.3% of the functions of the department have not been fulfilled yet, and there is a delay in carrying it out effectively. Cooperation from the Health and Family Welfare Department. Although the two departments have been active partners, the cooperation received from the Health Department is not always satisfactory. This is because the area of operation is yet to be clearly determined, and the nature of the duties and responsibilities between the two departments is not clearly stated, and this has led to variance of opinion and authority. Relationship with the law enforcement agencies. Although the assistance from the law enforcement units have been generally good, just a few 14.3% of the respondents feel that the support and cooperation from the law enforcement unit is not satisfactory. And this is also the result of conflict of devolution of responsibilities between the two departments. Support from NGOs. It is no doubt that the contributions of the NGOs and other community-based organizations have made a tremendous impact during the pandemic. So the overall response is very positive. And we all know that the duties of the LLTF include as far as keeping track of newly infected persons in the community, running contact tracing, assisting medical teams, and monitoring persons in home isolation or quarantine or in containment zones. They keep a close watch over the community, and also the church organizations have contributed tremendously in response activities. Cooperation and support from the general public. This can be reflected in terms of upholding various standard operating procedure, SOP, and COVID-19 protocols. Although COVID-19 protocol has been observed rigorously in most part of Aizawl district, there are some localities where the cooperation from the general mass has not been satisfactory. Financial assistance from the state government. 57.1% of the respondents feel that the financial support they get from the government is sufficient, whereas the remaining 42.9% feels that the funding is not sufficient. As a result of the insufficiency of funds, some plans and projects have been impeded. Because of the shortage of funds, the government is incapable of carrying out certain responsibilities and duties the community requires from them. Preparation to face the onslaught of the third wave. While COVID-19 cases are now much lower in India, the third wave is expected to arrive around October. Although the department is prepared to face another surge, it is uncertain about the resources it has. Nonetheless, to combat the upcoming third wave, the department has already made proper detailment of duties. State control on COVID-19 duties already set up, and several meetings have been conducted, and all the employees are briefed thoroughly. And factors for the low rate COVID-19 deaths in Mizoram. The population of Mizoram is very small in comparison with other states in India. The small population of Mizoram makes it feasible for the department to implement the SOP stringently. And with a smaller demography, it is also easier for the authority to manage the general public. And local level task force, they have become, it would not be wrong to say that they have become the watchdogs of the community. They carry out necessary measures to uphold various SOP and protocols adopted by the government and keep a close watch over the community. And church organizations. Church organizations have opened their doors to COVID-19 patients by converting the church as makeshift community COVID care centers, 4Cs, and usually asymptomatic COVID-19 patients who require less medical amenities are treated in the 4Cs. And this has helped not just in cost cutting, but it has prevented overburdening of government's healthcare facilities. And most importantly, it has prevented the exhaustion of healthcare facilities. The state's strict vigilance on interstate movement. This is another reason for the low rate of COVID deaths. Since the onset of the pandemic, the state government has strictly regulated intrastate and inter-village movements. And we all know MPAS. MPAS is a response app of the government of Mizoram created for restricting the movement of, initially, it was used for restricting the movements of travelers entering Mizoram. But now we have MPAS flight, we have MPAS road IDs, MPAS traffic, MPAS interdistrict, and MPAS goods. And problems and challenges. Shortage of man and trained personnel. This is the biggest difficulty faced by the disaster management department. Since the nature of their duty requires constant vigilance and responding to all emergency calls, the lack of trained personnel could impede their efficient functioning. And since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been incidences of wildfire, landslide, and other forces of nature, and they've occurred simultaneously with the presence of COVID. And we know that community participation has always been an essential element in our society. So when circumstances like this happen, every person renders his service to the society. And as a result, a considerable amount of time is lost to matters that are outside the concern of the pandemic. And this also greatly violates the social distancing protocol. Non-compliance of the SOP in some areas in Aizawl district has majorly hindered the efforts to alleviate and control the spreading of the virus in Aizawl district. This also indicates the lack of awareness, knowledge, and education on COVID-19 of the people. And negligence of the nodal department by the state government. By negligence, we mean that the department being a nodal department, a lot of times the department has been overlooked by the state government in carrying out their functions and duties. And the state government has many times failed to prioritize the Department of Disaster Management to take initiatives as a nodal department. Flow of communication from the top is very weak. This has affected the performance of the department to a great extent. The department has been involved in only a few works and activities unmatched to the department's potential and influence. The department has not been allotted enough roles and responsibilities to utilize their best resources. Although state control room on COVID-19 has been set up, the role of the department is very limited. This is because the department is not resourceful enough to provide the people what they need, and the department is not equipped with the right responsibility, manpower, and financial assistance to achieve optimal goals. Weak health systems and limited capacity. This is what makes Mizoram the most vulnerable to handle the COVID-19 outbreak. Mizoram is amongst the youngest and the smallest states of the Indian Union. And although there has been rapid urbanization in the state, there is impediment in the advancement of industries, infrastructure, manpower, and capital. And the close-knit nature of the society is impractical for the preparedness, prevention, and response measures for COVID-19 in the state. The Misos, we maintain a close-knit society and uphold numerous traditional practices that join us together on different occasions. And there is also a dominant presence of civil society organizations, which binds us together at all levels and age groups. And by close nature, we also have to include this increasing number of squatter settlement, congestion, and high density settlement in Aizawl city. We've come to the last part of the paper, that is recommendation. Effective measures should be re-implemented to generate awareness, knowledge, and education on COVID-19 to the people of Mizoram. If the public is not aware of relevant information about COVID-19, then building the capacity to prepare and respond to the extremities of the virus is not a possibility. So stronger efforts should be initiated. The disaster management and rehabilitation department should involve more agencies and organizations by collaborating with them in different lines of work. Waging a war on COVID-19, it cannot be carried out by a single organization. Therefore, it is necessary for the parent department to reach out to other organizations to create a strong forefront. There should be free flow of communication and coordination between different departments and different districts. This could prevent the conflict of devolution that we have said before. This could prevent the conflict of devolution of responsibilities between different departments. More staff should be recruited so that there are more warriors fighting this war. More staffs with special expertise will foster better cooperation and higher performance in disastrous situations. And lastly, increased manpower and bigger funds are crucial to fasten the pace of plans and programs. This increased manpower and bigger funds are necessary for the preparedness, prevention, and response measures for COVID in the state. And that brings us to the end of the paper. And before I conclude my presentation, I would just like to mention that this research was conducted in the month of June this year, and the situation was very different then. And now the COVID cases have gone up in many folds, and the situation has changed a lot. So in view of the changed situation in Mizoram, we would very much like to do a repetitive research on the same topic in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malsomi. Thank you, Department of Public Administration. And now I call on Pula H. Lalzidinga to give an expert comment on the presentation.
Okay. Can you hear? Yes.
Sir, Azoira me.
Oh, I don't know what happened. Anyway, let me give the volume again. Good evening, everyone. Chairperson Dr. BZT, respected Principal Puchuanga, and keynote speaker, Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau, all the faculty members, and all those who have joined this webinar. I feel privileged to give a short comment on the research paper prepared by Dr. Miso Pachuau and Ms. Miso from the Department of Public Administration. And first of all, I'd like to say that they have prepared an invaluable research paper within a short period of time. And we all know that because of this pandemic, it is not easy to collect materials, data. And the pandemic itself created this problem. And there were a number of lockdowns, and it was difficult for them to collect the data and also to go here and there for collecting those data. Anyway, they have prepared this good research paper. And on behalf of the Department of Public Administration, I'd also like to say thank you to Dr. Somte and Ms. Mary. And it is very interesting to listen from Dr. Somte on the topic, the working of the Department of Disaster Management and Rehabilitation in relation to COVID-19 pandemic, with special reference to Aizawl district. And again, I'd like to congratulate the Research and Consultancy Cell of Government Rang Bana College for organizing this kind of webinar, which is a very, very relevant topic in today's world. And the research scholars had presented very well on the problems faced by the people of Mizoram, and also of the problems and challenges faced by the Department of Disaster Management and Rehabilitation. And at the same time, they have also suggested some areas for improvement in facing this pandemic. And as Dr. Somte has mentioned, they have weighing up their research paper in June, way back in June, and many things have happened. And by that time, there were less than 50 deaths in Mizoram due to this COVID-19. But right now, we are crossing 260 already. So this shows that there is a need of deeper research to fight this pandemic. And they have given a number of suggestions and a number of challenges to be faced by the department. And one important point they have mentioned is that there is a need of coordination between various departments, because a single department cannot fight this COVID-19 alone. So they have, I'd like to say that they have done a very highly commendable job in preparing this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you once again, Department of Public Administration. We now proceed to the Department of Psychology. The presenters are Dr. Zothan Sami and Dr. Juliet Laremboy Ralte. I now invite them to give their presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Respected Principal, Mr. Lalsangkima Pachuau, the keynote speaker, Reverend Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau, the chairperson, Dr. BZT, all the subject experts, all the faculties of HBC, and all the participants in this webinar. We, the Department of Psychology, will be presenting our topic. And Ms. Dr. Zultanzami, the head of the department, and me, Dr. Julieta Remoy Ralte, will be presenting the study. So I request Dr. Zultanzami to share the slide. Yeah, thank you. So she'll be controlling the slide. I'll be giving the introduction part of the study. She'll be Dr. Zultanzami will be presenting the result and the discussion and the conclusion part of the study. So it is a pleasure to present to you the work that was conducted by the Department of Psychology. So this is Mazami. Can you go back to the first slide? Okay. So the topic is impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the mental health of the Mizo people. So here we are going to, since we are the Department of Psychology, our concern is on the mental health of the people, because we hear that everywhere in the world, the mental health of the people is affected. And so here we are in Mizoram studying the effect of mental health on the Mizo people. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let me talk first about the mental health, how mental health has been affected, what are the consequences, what are the effects, what are the scenario. So COVID-19 epidemic has become a public health emergency of international concern and now poses a challenge to psychological resilience. People are losing their resilience. They cannot fight back. So, their mental health is really affected. Fear of the virus, worry, and stress are normal responses to perceived or real threats. The threat may be perceived, it may be in their mind, or it may be real. So the threat is there. It is in the mind, it is also in the real world. So this has resulted in alert behavior, fear, worry, uncertainty, boredom, loneliness, etc. Negative psychological reactions resulting in stress, anxiety, stigma, and present depression. Fears and worries about one's health and the health of loved ones, financial situations, jobs, etc. These are all the impact of COVID-19 on mental health. There is a rise in, threats. There is a rise in fear. There is a rise in loneliness. There's a rise in anxiety. Like our keynote speaker had said, there is that, there is the curb in freedom of movement. Freedom of movement is not allowed anymore because, to stop the spread of the virus, we have to resort to, constricting our movement. Okay, next slide. So this is a very common, characteristic of this pandemic. Everywhere governments are, following quarantine and isolation, and this has resulted in, heavily on the mental health of the people. So this causes negative impact on one's mental health. The separation from loved ones, loss of freedom, boredom, loneliness, and uncertainty can cause a deterioration in an individual's mental health status. These can contribute to panic, frustration, boredom, low mood, and potentially depression. Other negative psychological effects, including symptoms of post-traumatic stress, confusion, and anger. Older adults may pose a serious threat to their health due to their increased risk of cardiovascular, autoimmune, neurocognitive, and mental health problems. So let's come to the next slide. So these are, the mental health issues that is resulting because of this pandemic. This is a very common mental health issue everywhere. People are facing this, that is depression, anxiety, and stress. So experiencing epidemics and natural disasters increases long-term experiences of depression and may also increase suicidal rates. Experiencing stressful life events and lack of coping skills are also major predictors of anxiety, stress, and depression. If these symptoms are left undiagnosed and untreated, they can negatively impact development, social life, and careers of people. Studies have highlighted a link between COVID-19 and anxiety, and also between COVID-19 and depression. Women and younger people show higher levels of depression, anxiety, stress, and fear of COVID-19. Symptoms of anxiety and depression among these students are found to be increasing due to social distancing and lockdown laws. Next slide. So these are the objectives of the study. To study the different levels of mental health dimensions, that is depression, anxiety, and stress, known as DAS, of the subjects during the COVID-19 pandemic. The next objective is to highlight if gender difference exists in levels of depression, anxiety, and stress during the pandemic. The third objective is to investigate if difference in age, that is young adults and middle adults, exists in DAS during the pandemic. The fourth objective is to investigate if marital status plays a role in the experience of DAS during the pandemic. Then the last objective is to investigate if nature of employment, that is students, government servants, private and unemployed, plays a role in depression, anxiety, stress during the pandemic. Next slide. Method and procedure. These are the methods that we used in our study. The design is the study incorporated between groups designed to highlight gender differences, age group differences, marital status differences, and occupational differences among the samples on the variables of interest. Statistical analysis like one-way ANOVA and descriptive statistical analysis were done with SPSS, which is used by various kinds of researchers for complex statistical data analysis. The participants recruited for the study, for the present study, were 556. Next slide. 556 males and females, Miso adults, with the age ranging from 18 to 60 years. Google form was used to collect data. Random sampling method was utilized to select the sample for scientific collection of data. Demographic variables included were age, gender, marital status, and nature of employment. Now I invite Dr. Zulkanzami to talk about the results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Juliet. Okay, so Dr. Juliet has spoken about the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on mental health and also the main objectives of our study. So in order to reach the objective that we have had beforehand, we use what is known as the Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Scale, also known as the DAS-21. This has been a scale that has been used worldwide right now in the pandemic and has proven to be one of the most effective psychological scales in measuring depression, anxiety, and stress. Even here in Mizoram, it was first used by the COVID-19 Committee on Psychological and Social Guidance in determining the DAS level among the quarantines during their quarantine period. And so the Department of Psychology has now used this particular test, or this particular research was conducted in the early, during our offline classes. So this would have been in the early period of 2021. So this is a scale that, from the name itself, DAS-21, 21 item scale that measures depression, anxiety, and stress. It is a 4-point Likert scale ranging from does not apply to me till apply to me at all, like most of the time. So here in the slide, I have given the norm table, and I will go on with that later on. Okay, so I will go straight to the result of the study. As we have mentioned before, this is the first result where whenever in psychology, when we do psychological analysis, especially with the SPSS, we try to find out the reliability of the psychological test that we use. And we found out that the reliability is 0.94 among Mizo population. So we take it as highly reliable to conduct our research. So let's just first look at the descriptive table. The first table on the right shows our data that is collected in the Mizo sample, and the second table shows the norm table, that is usually whether you can differentiate between high, low, moderate, and severe. So let's look at the blue table, where you can see that, as mentioned before, the sample size is 556. So if you look at depression, the depression is 11.49. If you have a mean of 11.49, if you look at the second table, where does 11.49 lie? So we can say that the depression level of Mizo people during the pandemic is they do have depression, but it is at a mild depression. And let's look at anxiety. Anxiety is 18.68. 18.68 of anxiety is equivalent to very extremely severe anxiety. No, it's a very severe anxiety. 15 to 19 is extremely high anxiety. And then you have stress. Stress level, if you look back at the studies that were presented, we found that stress was high in other culture. But what you can see is that here among the Mizo people, stress is normal. So we can contribute that maybe to the support system, the LLTF, and our social network, which has led to lower stress level. The next objective was to find out gender difference, who is higher, male or female in depression. Here we did a one-way ANOVA test, analysis of variance, and we found out, let us just look at the mean. Okay, let's just look at the mean. Rest, you can leave it now. Let us just look at the mean. Depression, it is higher in female. Anxiety, it is higher in female. Stress, it is higher in female. And if you look at the F ratio here, we can see that depression is higher in female at 0.05. So 95% of the population, depression is higher in females than in males. If you look at anxiety, again, in 99% of the population, anxiety is higher in females than in males. If you look at stress, again, 0.01 level of significance. So definitely all DAS symptoms are higher in females than in males. The third objective was to see whether, the DAS was higher among young adults or in middle adults. For young adults, we have taken the age group of 18 to 39 years. For middle adults, we have taken the age group of 40 to 60 years. Okay, so when you look at if you look at the mean, all DAS analysis scales show all younger people have higher scores. And usually these young people would be mainly students, students and younger adults, okay? And they comprise many of them comprise of students, both in the college level and in the professional level, and also in the university postgraduate level. So in all of these, again, all significant at 0.01 level. So at 99% of the population, anxiety is higher in the younger adults as compared to the older adults. Okay, let's look at again at the marital status. Here we look at single, married, and divorced. If you look at it again, where is it highest? Again, depression is highest among among single and divorced. Divorced are still single, but here single we take the unmarried ones, especially the students. Anxiety again high among the single and the divorced. And if you look at the stress, again higher in single and in the divorced. So again, all results are significant at 0.01 level of significance. That is 99% of the population. So the married people seems to be more, are less affected by DAS symptom as compared to singles and divorced. Divorced are still single. Okay, let's go to the final. This is the final analysis. That is a comparison between, again, students, government servants. When we look at private people with private entrepreneurship, private businesses who are running shops on their own, and things like that. And unemployed, these are the people without employment, who are not yet employed, and others. Maybe here we look at people who are farmers and like that. Okay, so here we have again all significant at 0.01 level of significance. And if you look here, again, students are the highest here. So most of us are teachers. So we should always, I think it is a good thing that we should know that of all the sections of employment among the population in Mizoram, students have the highest level of DAS symptoms, and government servants have the lowest. Students are the highest, whereas government servants are the lowest in all sections of DAS. So we have proven all our objectives. So I will come to the conclusion. Okay, I will come to the conclusion. Level of depression is higher than normal. That is, depression is mild, anxiety is very high, while stress is at a normal level. Females are found to be significantly higher than males among the Mizo population on all three scores of the DAS during this pandemic. Age also plays a factor, as the young adult population, comprising mostly of students, are significantly higher than middle adult age group. Single samples, unmarried and divorced, are found to be having higher DAS scores than those who are married. Then the nature of employment also plays a significant role in differences in DAS scores, with students having the highest DAS scores. So this is the research that has been conducted by the Department of Psychology here in Shangbana College. We know that it is a very, very minor research. We are planning to advance it more. We are again started with continuous data collection on the same scale, so that we can come out with a better result and a better design. Most likely we are planning to do add other variables, look at the interactive effect of these variables, of one variable on another variable, like that. So we hope that we would be able to come about with a more vibrant, let's say a more vibrant findings of the true nature of the COVID-19 pandemic on the mental health of the Mizo population. And at the same time, we know that mental health situation has become worse now. Fear and anxiety has started to be started playing a more prominent role, emerging more. But one thing that is against other prediction made by the WHO is the fact that in all other countries, many other countries, depression seems to be very high. But what is good about the Mizo society that we can see is that depression, though it is there, is not as high as that is prevalent in other studies and in other cultures. And at the same time, stress is also normal among the Mizo. And so we can definitely, we are living in a very good society. We are living in a very supportive, collectivistic society. Maybe that is the reason why we have this rate of low depression and anxiety. So from me here, from the Department of Psychology, thank you everybody for giving us this chance to put forward our research findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zotanzami. Thank you, Dr. Juliet. I know that your research is an effort from all the faculties of Department of Psychology. So thank you to all the faculties of Department of Psychology. And we have a professor from MZU, Professor C. Lalsangkima Pachuau, to give his expert comment. Professor, we call on you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairman, respected principal, respected keynote speaker, respected subject expert from other disciplines, my dear colleagues and dear friends. Actually, it was heartening to learn about the research finding of the Department of Psychology from Bana College. This is, they have chosen a highly relevant topic during the pandemic, and they have chosen all the negative emotions that can arise, like depression, anxiety, and stress. And it is obvious during the pandemic that a positive well-being is rather difficult to be expected, and they have concentrated around the negative well-beings of depression, anxiety, and stress. What well to note here is that, yes, they have found a very highly reliable measurement outcomes, even though they use the Google form. And out of 566, if I'm not mistaken, participants, they have got a reliability of 0.94, which is excellent, so to say. So with regards to the measurement outcome, there is no doubt that, yes, the tools appears to measure what the participants reliably. And what will again to note here is that the highest measurement outcomes that is observed was on anxiety. And in the field of behavioral sciences, we consider comorbidity very highly. So with the third wave of the pandemic approaching, it appears that the present high level of anxiety, which I believe might have been, the data might have been conducted few months ago. So this anxiety level can turn into any other form, which may be the most likely candidate can be depression. So a precaution is needed at this point of time. And if we look at the most significantly affected demographic variables, we can see that the students are the ones who are most affected. So immediate care, maybe from the government, is also required, and for every institution as well. And this is a high time, like this anxiety, which is having comorbidity with depression, if it turns into depression, it can result into hopelessness. And we all know that our students are the future of our state and of our nation. So preservation activities will have to be taken at the right, at this point of time already. And then another important thing I would like to highlight is that, yes, the findings are really, really robust. And when we look at that, males are, as compared to the females, are less affected. The youth, they are much more affected, the merit are preserved, and of course the government employee are preserved. So what we can see here is that, yes, any research by itself is not always complete. And so if possibilities are there, different government employees at different levels, the involvement during the pandemic from the religious point of view, from the societal point of view, and of course, the social masses who are actually not participating in dealing with the COVID-19. All this can be considered for future demographic variables. And of course, vulnerability of individuals here is an important factor. And they have taken the age group of the youth and the middle adult. And the most vulnerable group, that is the later stage of chronological age, if it can be included in the further study, this will highly throw a better light into the findings as well. And this being included, if we can include some kind of active contact with the COVID-19, like being found to be COVID positive, being in the 4C, or being in the hospital, or being in the isolation, or being in the ICU. And there are families who are not who are spared till today also. So if we can classify on this ground and identify the significant factors that can help deal with the depression or anxiety that can arise with COVID-19, and those demographic variables, other variables that can help aid in dealing with COVID-19 as well, if they can be identified, and if the analysis can be planned to identify which are the most significant contributing factor that is helping in dealing with COVID-19, and that is resulting in the most significant, having the most significant impact, if they can be identified in the future researches, maybe before the upcoming third wave, if it is coming, or during the third wave. This will really throw a light not only for the at the state level, but this will show importance for the whole discipline and in dealing with COVID-19 as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. That was really insightful, I must say. Even though I'm not from psychology, I see that the importance of and the relevance of psychological studies at this time is really important. And I hope that the psychology department takes note of his suggestions for further studies. And now we call on the Department of, thank you. The Department of Political Science, Dr. H. Lalsangkima is the presenter. Yes.
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Thank you. Now from mental health to politics. Good evening to our respected principal, Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau, our chairperson, coordinator, research and consultancy, all the presenters and faculties present here this evening, and all the participants and viewers. I am Dr. H. Lalsangkima, and I shall be presenting our research paper. Can I share? Can I? Oh, okay. Okay, so this is our topic is election in the pandemic, the challenges of conducting election during pandemic in Mizoram. This research is done by the Department of Political Science, and the students, I would like to mention before I go ahead with my presentation, that the students have played a vital role in collecting the data. So I would like to acknowledge them. Okay, so these are the students who have helped edi vi elom sanga la fakomamalsom donga la rempuya ramlupuyi Joseph Val Hung, and I feel that wouldn't be fair to go on without mentioning their name. Okay, now I shall continue. As the institution of democracy insists timely election, decision must be made to ensure democratic institutions functions as it would do even during extraordinary times like the pandemic. This paper looks into the roles and functions of all the election stakeholders during COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has presented severe challenges to the management and scheduling of election across the world in 2020, while natural disasters and other emergency situations pose similar challenges. Typically, they have been more locally impact on election. For example, elections were postponed for public health reasons in West Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Liberia during the Ebola. That was in 2013 to 2016, and campaign restrictions were introduced in Mexico in 2009 during the swine flu epidemic, and that was to prevent the spread of the virus. Many countries have conducted elections. At least 99 countries and territories held elections and referendums between 21 February to 13 December 2020. Yet there are also a lot of countries which have postponed their elections. And here, the Republic of Korea, I would like to mention, is one of these audacious countries and one of the first to hold major election at the national level under the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the national level also, we have witnessed different states conducting election. And this paper, this article, however, will study and focus on the election that was conducted in Mizoram after the outbreak of COVID-19. So these are the elections that was conducted during the pandemic, general elections to local council, village council, Saiha, constituency, autonomous Lai district council, the general elections to AMC and by-elections of Sertib constituency. So these are the elections that was conducted during the pandemic. And I would like to mention here, which was not part of our research, that the by-election which is to take place in the recent future has also some issues to deal with regards to pandemic. And these are the aims and objectives. The aims and objectives of our research is to find out the challenges faced by the stakeholders of election conducted during pandemic, to study the differences in the procedures of conducting election during pandemic and normal time, to study if pandemic hindered the democratic values, to study the safety measures taken by the authority during pandemic elections, to find out if the voters followed the standard operating procedure. And these are the issues that was addressed. If it was a threat to the opportunities for political campaigning by candidates and political parties. As we know that election is a democratic festival, so usually pre-pandemic elections had lots of campaigns and lots of forms were inculcated in the pre-election period, but now due to pandemic, all that is not possible. And there was a fear that incumbents have additional advantages over the other candidates. Ensuring of all voters to vote safely was also a concern. Effective electoral management, institutional certainty. These were the issues which is addressed by this article. As for our methodology, as it is a quantitative research, and therefore the primary source is an informal interviews which was conducted by the students of political science department. The interviewers conducted an informal, unstructured conversational interview via telephone and internet tools, as the research was done during pandemic and lockdown, which was again timely announced by the government. So the interviewers had general ideas of what they wanted to ask, and there was a limitation to their mobility, so they were not able to move about to ask, to interview. So they had to do it through the means that they have, which was telephone and other internet tools. They interviewed various stakeholders of the elections, the government officials, the authority of the village, and even the local level, the candidates and the party workers, to name a few. And the kind of questions that they asked were like, for instance, were you prepared for a pandemic elections? Were you given sufficient training for the elections? Were you provided with enough staff, or was there shortage of staff during this pandemic? What mode of tools did you use to convey your message or information to the masses? That was the kind of question that was asked. Even though this research being a qualitative research, there was a need to collect information from the voters. Therefore, simple random sampling survey was conducted via questionnaire to study the nature of election. This enabled the researchers to have a clear idea on the challenges faced by the voters, their attitudes towards the elections, as well as the measures taken by the authority for public health. And for the secondary source, the articles, newspapers, and the official documents were used. The preparation of the election. For any election, the preparation is one of the most crucial stage. Of all the years, 2020 was a very significant year, as it was scheduled for conducting important elections. It was on the 24th March 2020 that the government of Mizoram started issuing notification on maintaining safety and awareness with regards to the upsurge of COVID-19. The obvious question of whether the preparation of pandemic election was satisfactory and adequate was observed from different angles by different stakeholders interviewed with varying opinions. Now, for the election officials, the preparations of the personnel in charge of conducting election was based on the guidelines given by the State Election Commission, and particularly Lalsangkima Deputy Secretary, SEC, has observed that the major steps were taken for conducting of safe election. The numbers of polling booths were increased in various areas. Thorough training was given to presiding officers, polling officers, returning officers, and all the officials who were to conduct the elections. And moving on. Okay, the candidates and the campaign strategy. Like I have mentioned earlier, election is a democratic election, and this time it was very much curbed. So unlike pre-pandemic elections, there were guidelines issued with regard to the campaign strategy of the candidates. The State Election Commission, Government of Mizoram had issued orders and guidelines on COVID-19, which mentioned the safety measures to be followed by the candidates. The guidelines were strictly followed by both the political parties and the candidates. And here I would like to share some of the experiences of the candidates. Particularly, it interests me when Mrs. Bilal Ompui, Executive Councillor, shared her experience, stating that during her campaign, she had only 2 persons going with her, and she had mask on the entire time. And she avoided as much as possible to go inside the house. And she would just stand at their veranda, but if she was invited in, she would go in alone. And that was one of the experience that was shared by our respondents. And next is the communication tool. Communication is one of the most important aspects of any event. Dissemination of information is very important during election, from the officials or to the candidate, and most importantly, for the voters to make a well-informed decision in electing the right ruler. Especially during the pandemic, there were many announcements and notifications made, not only for free and fair election, but for safe election, which was very new because pre-pandemic election was all about free and fair election. But here in the pandemic elections, we have health concerns, which never was before. And the officials had also used a lot of their expenditure was on, hand sanitizers and ways to maintain social distancing, which was a very new thing. And that had to be communicated to the voters. And for that, electronic devices were used. WhatsApp, Facebook, and telephone calls were very important, because during these lockdowns, the candidate used the means of telephone call to carry on their campaigns, because every now and then there was a lockdown announced in one area or the other. So election campaign could not go on as planned by the candidate. So they had to move to other means. They had to search for other means for their communication. And that they did through their Facebook platforms. And these platforms became a means or a platform for disseminating information. And one of the most important tools, which is the YMA information mic, where information was announced in real time by the authority at the local level. TV was used as a platform for campaign kickoff, which enabled the candidates to publicize their manifestos. But however, another opinion came out saying that despite giving information ample of times on the procedure of voting, there were still many invalid votes. Therefore, there is a need to create more awareness on voting procedure. That is still to be addressed. As for voting and maintaining of SOP, on the day of polling, there are certain SOP to be followed by certain persons. Every voters were being detailed serial number, and a particular time was assigned for them to cast the vote. In most places, the morning hours were allotted to the senior citizen, and strict SOP for COVID-19 was imposed by the State Election Commission and Disaster Management and Rehabilitation Department. The feeling of self-worth is felt by people when casting vote. This truly depicts the democratic value that the election holds. Voters throughout the pandemic elections have been tolerant while casting their vote. The attitude of the people could be witnessed when casting their vote. Example, the way they dress, especially we witnessed somebody wearing a full PPE during casting of vote. That is how much people were aware of the situation. And also, everyone had mask on, and hand sanitizer was abundantly used. Gloves were worn by many people. Social distancing was maintained. And normally during polling days, there would be rowdy people and intoxicated people asking the candidates for money. And pandemic has not seen such behavior. Nonetheless, if there were such people, it can be said that the amount of such behavior was decreased as compared to pre-pandemic election. Speaking of people coming out to vote, the voter turnout was better than expected in each of the election conducted by SEC. In case of AMC election, it has been reported that 40% voters were were the expected turnout, but the actual turnout was more than 60%, which was as reported by the officials. Now, the voters' attitudes and observations had to be taken into consideration, and to do that, here random sampling was done, and the total number of sample is 130, and out of which 53.3 were female and 47.7% were male. I will not go into the details of the data. Instead, this is the result that was witnessed after analyzing the questionnaire. The preparatory stage was well conducted by the officials. Every stakeholders in every stage were cautious. The result highlights that the dissemination of information was done rather well and with ease, and that is because of the availability of the YMA information mic. And on the questions of whether the pandemic have any additional advantage for the incumbent, there is no clear-cut answer. However, it can be said that the pandemic has brought in a situation where all candidates have a disadvantage as they are unable to move about and conduct campaigns like pre-pandemic times. So here, again, I would like to mention that there is no alternative other than public voting. In other countries, there is an alternative of postal ballot and all that, which was not given to the civilians here. And besides the officials, LLTF, YMA, and MPF were proven to be most instrumental. House-to-house campaign was maintained at its minimum, and the pandemic situation was not advantageous for any of the candidates, not only the incumbents, but also for everybody. Okay, so now I will move on to the findings and the conclusions. The analysis finds that the masses were on their feet throughout the process of elections. There were few areas where the public were not thrilled with regard to too much contact during campaign season. However, they were not skeptical about it. Not all were aware of the preparation made by the government officials. However, as mentioned, the LLTF, YMA, and MPF have been rather instrumental in giving ample of information with regard to maintenance of safety during the process, as well as in guiding them. And the challenges that were present was tackled in proper manner. There were many differences in comparing the elections during normal times and during pandemic. The voter turnout, as said before, was quite good, which proves that the value of democracy was upheld. And health issues was not addressed in other elections. And it became a point of focus in this particular election. And it can be concluded that the election was rather satisfactory. The challenges were overcome with prior preparation and help of the various organizations. And that would be all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pinky. And I will not comment because I am not an expert. They have an expert right here, the person on the field, practical field. So Puma Somzwala, I invite Puma Somzwala, MCS, to make a comment.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Government Bana College for having me here for this very important webinar, and it's a privilege to be a part of this webinar. And I would like to commend the Political Science Department for having carried out a very detailed study on the election during the pandemic. And I think it is a very relevant topic, especially during pandemic times. I call it relevant because the nature of election is very different from other exercises we do in society. Election is not something we can postpone during the pandemic. It has to go on. Many activities we can postpone, we can delay, but elections are the litmus test of a democracy. So they have to be carried out. And the department was able to come up with invaluable findings regarding how the election was conducted in Mizoram. And first of all, my observation, the findings which they found out regarding the voter turnout, I think is very noteworthy, because the elections were conducted during a time when the people were not still very familiar with the disease, with the pandemic. There was still a very big social stigma regarding the disease. And as it was rightly pointed out, many people believe that the voting turnout would be quite low during the vote on the voting day. However, the voter turnout turned out to be better than expected. And in addition to their findings, I would have loved to see a more analytical finding regarding why more people turn out in so much numbers on the day, more than expected. So I think it would have been very nice if there could be some interviews with the people on why they came out in so much larger numbers. And a very important point which was highlighted in the research was that the fairness maintained during the elections. Myself, I was not directly involved in the conduct of the elections which they studied, so I think I am in a position to comment. Because had I been one of the officials conducting the elections, it would not have been fair for me to comment so much on the fairness of how the election was conducted. So during the pandemic, we know that the government imposed so many restrictions on the movement of people, on their whereabouts, especially in public areas. So it is very possible that the government could misuse the machinery it had and made the COVID situation some kind of a reason to further the election prospects of the party in power. But as the research findings point out, it seems that there was not any particular advantage held by the ruling party during the elections. So I think this is a very noteworthy and remarkable findings of the research, especially from the point of view of the officials conducting the elections. So many times it is very difficult to assess the fairness of elections, especially if it is not, especially if proper research is not conducted. So from the research findings, we now know that the election machinery performed well. It was independent from any influence by the ruling party. So for me, I think that is a very noteworthy finding of the research. And something which surprised me was that regarding the findings, the SOP was followed quite well to a great extent. That is what the research found out. So this is also a very noteworthy finding of the research team, and especially during the poll day, wherein large number of people have to come to the polling booths to cast their votes, because in in India, we don't really practice voting electronically or through through the internet, mainly because voting through the internet generates a lot of doubt among the people regarding the fairness of the elections. So people have to come out, and the election was conducted in such a well-prepared manner as found out by the research. So I think this is a very noteworthy point. And all in all, I feel that the research highlighted the positive qualities of our democracy in India, because elections in India are the litmus test of any democracy, any ruling party, or any country. If the elections are free and fair, if the elections are found to be free and fair, even after in-depth research, as the one just did by the political science department, we can fairly say that in spite of various accusations from different quarters, electoral democracy is still very healthy in Mizoram, and democracy among the people of Mizoram is still quite strong, and the people still have a very good faith in the electoral processes of the government and on the election machinery. So the findings of the team, I feel, especially from the point of view of one who has been conducting elections for a number of times, is very positive, and I think it's something I can cheer about, especially because it is very difficult to assess oneself regarding whether the elections conducted by the officials is free, fair, and as directed, as desired by the constitution and by the laws of the land. So I will end by saying kudos to the finding teams of political science department, and I'm looking forward to more research findings from the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pumas of Zwala. That was a very positive comment. And if at all it is positive, it is because of officials like you who are doing the groundwork and making sure that it is fair for everyone. So thank you. And we look forward to more collaborations.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Thank you very much.
Now we come to the next presentation, the Miso department, and the presenter is Vida Berkopuimoya, and we now invite the Department of Miso to present their research.
Miss Kalome, Catherine Tretheim, all can network he don't know, look at Hannah long chuck low let put Trina.
LB Secretary.
Ole Kalome. So young can Miso doing a present donna, Miss Le can principal take and keynote speaker tele faculty came on each who Ami telepon na matrang lang tel zong te in the fine by kabuk chewa. It's one presentation he screen share kalau na yang chu le kan hu thai ang chu mo ke ni kan department ina kan zir per chu hey thelaya kan tarlan ang hian impact of COVID-19 pandemic on Mizo literature tinia a Mizo trong in kanda boka Mizo literature COVID-19 ina ripuina honga nei dan kan zir dek bera chulaya chu zadina kan saikur le kan present kha ani don ani tikha min lo thiat sak masata una atha ome tichuan kan kalhal zungzunga he kan topic le kan zir na hian kan research yana tumber chu COVID-19 in Mizo literature honga nei te zau zo ka zirani a tichuan chu an huam china khan kum sang ni som ni chung kha he research yan a huam deuh berati kha lo hrema sale bok taila achan chu kan zir hun chung kha kan hriat chian lo chuan nakina kan findings tele kan nakina result lo la chok a khan har satna ngai dan kan lo ngai dan dang kan lo nei thei takin kan zir hun chung kha kum sang ni som ni chung chawani ti la ya kha lo hriat sak ma sa ta ula tha ome ti chuan kan hriat thewangin March atanga December in kar kha hipui ne na kanin chiale kan lockdown te partial lockdown kan ti rang te kan man hun le khalai boruak lai ber kha chu ani a chu wang chuan kan target le hela kan research poina a huam lian ber chu khang hun lai boruak kha ani ti kha hele bok taila ti chuan kan research methodology a hian kan man lang sar ber chu primary data collection a khan questionnaire kha kan manga questionnaire mong hian mi rang te ne na zo na te kan siama tin hei ba ka hian le khabu ang tele record MAL Mizo Academy of Letters record ang chi tele khatiang ang chi ni record kan mu thei ang thau chi kha kan mang boka ti chuan he kan paper hi toy theiang beran soi kan pum dona kan research pum pui hi phek som thum chuang velania kan han kai toy viawa janina hian chona tang pui de chau kan soyanga kan research chunga kan tum lom lian deuh kan chai lom lian deuh kha chapter ang zongin abung ang zongin kan ta chunga chuan ahma sabira chuan mizo te nun hluya hripui le hong rang te kha kan ron zir masa kan ron chui masa a heta hian hripui huang chunga hian hripui kher lo po tra kan ti ang chi te rampu mina har satna kan to langsar deuh ang chi kha kan ron highlight ta chu chuan enge ngonga neya literature a ngonga nem ti lai vel te kha khalaya khan kan ron soitel bokani ti chuan chapter 2 a hian Covid-19 in Mizo le khapu chuak a hong dan ti kha kum sang ni som ni chunga hang kan lu chauta a he pandemic awang hian Mizo le khapu chuak engangin nge hong ti te tin le khapu chuak ina akai noi rang a khan aziak mi te offset lama lo chutu te azuar tu te kha ang chi rang te khan zo na le data ti kan la khoma chunga tang chuan engenge an hong an nei ti lai kha fil rang atring khata hang kan zir boka tin mizo hla a hong an nei dan te kan zira bung thum na hian bung di na hian Covid-19 in thule hla zirna kal punga hong an nei dan chung chang te kan soi boka ti chona to pa khang kha khai khom na kha kan siam bokani de chuan apunga khakal de le thuak taila bungma sabera kan saya khan kan sei to khan mizo nun hluya hripui le tram te khatiangina literature thu le hla hnonga nei dan chung changa kha kan chui chu ni a mizo hun kan hriat china mizo history ranga hripui mai pia lama khan tram kan tiang chi te har satna lian tham rampu mina kan tor tam taka kha alo oma chung ang chi ho chu hei laya kan tarlan ta ang hian a hun dan kalphung te po kha in dot mu mal tak mai khan hrim mau tam kan ti te thing tam kan ti te kha kum inkar dana mu mal takin alo thleng thri na ni ti te kha kan hrengal bokanga ti chuan sa kha zanga somnga hei hi mizo chanchin hluya kan hriat hlat thei per abikin hripui chungchang le khami tram chungchang vela khan anita chuta chuan thingpui tam kha oma chu thut mun zai mizo hma saber pola kan soi thin tlar ni zaya thut mun zai lo chuana kha he thingpui tama mi thi tam takan oma banga an insun na hla tang lo chuak ani ti te kha kan chanchin hui tam ziak na atangin kan hu a khatiang ang chi te khan thil thleng tam taka kan soi vek lo helaya kan tarla na te hi hong a lo nei ve zela hong nei kan mu zo lo a chi te po kha om thona sa kha zakwa so matanga som pakhat mau tam atram lo thleng khan ma loka kum sa kha zakwa pasari pariat vela ron lar chho tran le khalai ko hlanding tir po hong na satak nei puma zai ron invor sang zel ron met dai tu poimo tak kha kha tram le aken tel thil te kha lo nia ti te kha kan ziak tela tin Spanish flu kan ti influenza ripui tian soi bok thina kha sang kha zakwa som paria ta lo thleng le ahnu lok kum sang kha zakwa som bakwa kha ripui torna atanga harna lo thleng ni the anga lan lang the tu khan thil tam tak lo thlenga tin tun thlenga mizo leng khom zai tia kan hlan nei ro pui tak tak te hi he har nei na rin sang kha zakwa som ti chho bor vela la lo chuak tam tak te kha alo ni chhota ni ti te po kha kan jiak tel boka tin sanga zakwa somnga pariat le somnga pakua MNFF movement kha tramdo pol atanga MNF party ron in din chhaudan tele nu lokat rambuai lo in tran dan chung chang tele rambuai ni mizo literature hong na satjia te po kha kan soi kai bokani tilaya kha kan zir kaya ti kha kan soi le boka kha kha khami khang ho kha chapter 1 a chuan kan han chai dewa tin Covid-19 lo lu dan tele khami kum sang ni som ni chunga kan data ang chi te kha kan lo highlight bokani ti chuan nichina ahma salama kan soi to ong khan abung dot le a chuan kha he pandemic ena mizo le kha pu chuak le khoi thilte a hong da na kha kan lo en le thuak thuak anga heta kan zir chian bera chuan Covid-19 ina le kha pu chuak a number zong in engtin nge hong ti te aziak tu te engtin nge hong dan ti te le kha bu zuar ku te engtin nge hong ti te a publisher alo ti chuak tu kan ti ang chi te le kha bu lo chwa tu ang chi hawa khan engtin nge hong dan ti te kha kan zir bokani ti chuan helai data hian kan hu theyanga umruk sunga mizo le kha bu chwa dan chung chang kha kan ron highlight ta a chuta chuan a niam na le a pum na kha kan ron da tel ta a heti hian a chiang jok donin ka hria helai a hian lo en masa taila kum sang ni som panga a khan le kha bu za som li a chuaka ama kum sang ni som pali ain pusom thum le pakwa in atlema ti khan le kha bu kha ron chuak ta zela kum sang ni som pakwa hian bu za ni som thum chuakin record ani a chuta chuan ama kum ain za le som ngatin tamani le kha bu chuak khan ma lo son ve data sang ni le som pasar le som sang ni le som paria thi record atlema hei hi record kan rin chan ber chu kan soi tong in Mizo Academy of Letters an ni a an ni hian Book of the Year 10 than thina wangin le khapu an la khoma ti chuan khat khang kha kan rin ber ania chuta chuan a la khom tu te a khan he mi data diklo hi chen ka thui view maya then khat chuan achang chuan le khabu magazine te ko phran zirlai bu zong tenen an chiar vek line then kha te ro chuan an mamo tur chin chau la khom te kha shina khatiang khan data kha ain thang thuk theya amero chu tun nai hen chuan kalphung mu mal ta kan han kal tran to wangin le khabu chuak kan han tarlan te po hi dik thokhat deu to tura chuan kan in ngaya kum sang ni som nia khan chung khan le khabu za som thum le pasari achuaka kum hasa ain som ko le pathum zetina claim ta ani ti chuan le khabu chu tu lampang hianin kum in le sang ni som ni chunga an le khabu chut a khan englam pang hoi nge le khabu in chut tamber tia zona kan pe ga chuan thujiak da khomna kan ti ang chi kha le pathian thulam kha a in za chi a khang kha an chut tamber pol ni in an soya tin kum masa sang ni som pakwa kan research ti at ma kum nena ani an le khabu chut zat khai khin na chuan za som ni chuangin atle mani ti kha pandemic kuna khan chuan an product kha atlem ti te kha an chan na atangin kan mu thei bokani tin ziak mi kan ti hian mi som thum le pali select bi kan nei ta a Mizoram Puma Book of the Year dong to tele khatianga ziak mi lang sar de tele khapu ti chuak tam deu ho kha kan han select bi ka chung mi te a chon zo na kan pe ka chuan kum sang ni som ni chung khan le khabu ti chua in yem ka tia zo na kan pe ka chuan za a somnga le pariat zetin nei lo in an soya za a somni le pakhatin anti chuaka omjia chuan ziak mi langsar kan ti kumtela kumtina le khapu han ti chuak ve zeu zeu thin te zinga khan ni kha pandemic awanga ti chuak talang ang chi kha anlo omve ni ti te kha lo lang ta tin chu ti rual chuan anwaya kan data hian covid nuwa le ka bubu sai mek lati chualo bu engjang nge nei ti lai vela ha kan han zot le a chuta chuan bukhat nei kha tamveu maya bu ni buthum buli nei te po kha anom nualani khang jiak mi te jinga khan chu chu anakina po kan la soidon thawa covid ina mizo literature a khong langsar lo lan na tak tak tur chu sang ni som pakhat som pani som pathum hemi a post covid ajokian alo lang donin a hriat ani tilaya kha kan jeptel zoi du boka tin le khabuzia na hun an nei tam ziak mi te khan hun an nga wang khan le khabuzia lama khan tran an la a le khabuzia kha an nga pha ani ti te kha an hun nei dan le an hun man dan chung chang kan zo po khalaya kha an chan na tam berani ti chuan poetry la chung chang a khal le ta la poetry kan ti hian kan lo hriat nan kan sui zaw le zoi du chu mizo tena poetry kan ti a bi khen chu a thuk nei le nei lo chung chang hi indial na thui ta kom theine khalai kha kan huam tir veka khalai kha lo hre mas tai la tha ome ti chuan covid-19 le mizo hla chung chang a chuan kan soi tong khan march lockdown atang khan atanga december thla thleng khan mizo la po tu rang te zo na kan mu atanga kan hriat chu mizo la thar hi zanga chuang vel a chuak ni khan kan hri a ti chuan heng zinga hla za chuang chu covid pol liao athua covid chung chang te akal mong hrim hrima khalai thilvel ron covid related thla ti mayang khatiang chi kha ani a tin ni kum sang ni som ni chung kian labu mimalina an poetry ziana bu anti chuang chi kha buru ka chuaka ti chuan kum sang ni som ni abuat sai ni si a nu akuma an release man tang lo sang ni som ni pakhat belan ti chuaka nual boka ti chuan kan la rang la chuak rang kan la khoma tanga an theme ti mayang an thup weekend langsar zual deu chuan bitin huap zo nun thlir na lampang ta kha atam em maya tin pathian outna mihring nun ina kan ti theilo wanga pathian beiseina outna lampang kha tam taka oma tin kan hla tun covid hla chuak ma sa hawa langsar tak chu soisel na ain fakna le choi moina frontline worker an dia mo atu te ponita sela khatiang lampang kha soisel mai lawa fakna lampang la kha achuak tam em maya tin hripuya wanga chung kwa mimal ram ina torna angchi pon chuana lampang la kha atam viau boka tin mason tura infui na lampang kha nual bok ani inven na le zirtir na kong la te po oma tin lockdown le curfew nun pon chuana then chu a fiam thu deu reu lungleng lutuk om ngai na helo ti angchi te hatiang angchi hla hlim om lampang chi te po kha tam tak kan covid laya la chuak zinga hian omani tin hlapua tu then khatho kan han biak na le zona kan siama tangan chana tangin lockdown khan hlapua lama mason na asiam che mtia kha ti zona kan siama chuan tamjok chuan la kan phu abel nualani tia min chang khatam takan oma hundanga hlan phu thin aya hlapua tamakha tamjok kan omboka tin mizo poetry a hian ma son phai ring em tia zona kan peka chuan za som sari le pariat zetin he pandemic he covid-19 hian mizo poetry a ma son tir nge an ring ani ti te kha kan ron tar lang tel bokani te chuan a dot le chuan covid-19 le hripui le literary activities kan han tia hi ahmasa kan soitong kan thule la journal chungchang vela kha heta chuan kan ron hol de bera khami hripui lo len ma a heng thule la zirna huang seminar symposium kan ti ang chi te khatiang rang buat sai kha akal phung kha alo in thak chhota webinar te kha lo ni ta ka wang khan chu chuan kha khating ang event hun puiron in siam kha aron ti pung ta hloi mai ni a ol samna awang kha alo ni ti kha langsar takin a riat ngal theya kan chin chia thei china kumsang hi som hi chung kan voice om le pathum jet mai khatiang literature kai noi thu le la zirbing na kan tiang chi kha voice om le pathum jet mai webinar oma chung jinga ahma saber pakhat hi chu pandemic then ma tak tak ang deu alat in lawani wang kan he chu aran pa amuna ne ang chi khan ya atba ka tam jo ka chu internet lampanga webinar manga ne ni hloma chungjinga chuan kan tarlan du chu hei pasarina indo myanmar literature kan tiang chi te tin heta number 6 na zo tong zirna ti ang chi te hi Mizoram pon lama tanga ron buat sai te an ni hloma ni ti te kha kan sei tel duwa hemi chungchanga kan sei lan du pakhat dia chu he pandemic hian hemi konga hian hason na tam takaron thena chu chuan ol samna ti mayang achanga research person tu mun na takatanga kau ngai thin thil tam tak khamin ron solve sakta chu chuan heng program buat sai konga hian thil thar kha min ron siam sakani ti chuan adot le chuan inti siakna lampang kha kumdang a in hetiang ang inti siakna literature kai no inti siakna kha ve nual ti te kha kan han mu boka thon thu injia siak center wai me na buat saya heta hian thon thu zanga somni le pathum se taluta chuta thon thu thazul te chu abua siamani a ungcho ti le khabu mangin buat sai ni ti te kha rebok taila ti chuan melham reality show in first international Miso story writing competition abuat sai boka chuta chuan thon thu somria le pasari la ya lu boka tinzai tu rem group in the point of the year thanan la phwa thiamte la phu an khon khom mok boka la somli chuang an the lu boka heta hian tin PhD department lamin pi poimo na la in po siap chungchang te an buat sai ya chuta chuan la somlu le pariat zet alu boka khang khan inti siak na po kha pandemic khong chuwa khan kumdang ai ma khan khatiang Mizoram pum huap kan ti ang chi le he Mizo na tha pum pui huap thei tur ang chi kha khatiang inti siak na lampang kha tam tak organization ya buat sai ni ti kha kan han kan mut tel bokani ti chuan atlang kom nan chuan he Covid-19 ripu hian kumsang ni somli chunga Mizo tu le la din muna angong dan kan khai kom na chuan a chezongin ngong anei lian vak lawani ti kha kan muta a tin angong lian jok chu kumsang ni somli pakhata hian lo lang jok ton ni na ngai theya somli pakhat apia lampanga po engchen nge ri hian min na tuam zel don a hriat lawa ram sum le pai ngong ani wang hian thu le hla phe na sum don na le ei zon na kalpui tu te ta ne ro chuan ngong lian takane ya an ei zon na kong le an sum de chuna kong rang ranga chu chu har sat na khang khan chuna thleng ve ni ti te kha a hriat thei boka kumdanga sum le hun tam tak sen na tur thil tam tak chu he pandemic hian ol sam zoka kalpui dan kharon siam thar ti te kha kan ria tin de khabu chiar le zia le hemi azir na kong rim rim a hian Mizo te hi engeng le khachiar ko wa te po kan niam ani ti te po mi tam tak soi ni thine ni amaro chu mason heng kan data ko le khrang ranga alan dan chon mason lampong kan pan ni ina langa he pandemic wa hen mi tam takin de khabu an chiar tam pha de khabu te po online zuar te pon lo tam pha khatiang khan mi te le khabu chiar lama ma son tir nge don di in kan rebokani ti kha mi te se khati jong kha kan present the ko chu ni kalome
Thank you pu ti khang ai to dro vi le ver khopui boya angai nom thin lung te po in tileng thin and har sat na hianin thu le la min ti ho sa ti kha in proof chiang le ani chuan pudar chwai lawa ren thei expert comment nei tu rin ni lo so mangu
Chairman le principal le keynote address soi tu Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau te le thian tak te u ei Mizo department research finding kha ngai nom maya soi kan soi ri kon ti po lo in ka khia tun ma ripui lo leng to ei tun chau ni lo ripui leng kha lo leng fo to khangina kan raman noi dan enan soi te kha ngai nom khop maya kha kana kina kan in le nan te po thil poi mo takania tin tun covid awanga thule la lo chuak ina contemporary poetry theme a herdang lamdan kha covid anti khang te po kha ni om reng po nia khang kha chu achiang in karinga chu chuaning tinge kan ram nuna ra chue mo hong mo nia kha inan soi te kha alomom le maya tin ziang mi tam takin le khabun sia tam pha ti kha alom rolin ni turpo ni na langa hemi na min bo be chuan kan tu le la ka thana thudona chuti lova anzia bil so ti kha alomom le maya tin finding akan publication board in kumtang aya suman nei tlem chunga le khabun ti chua tamte SNPB lampoina le khabuan ti chua tamjok thu te kha ngai nom khop maya kha data han tarlana khan komena khan nikum ain na sangni som nia khan sangni som pako ain som ko pathum ngot khan atlem na sangni som pasari le som pariat ai kha chuan sangni som nia le khabu chuak kha atamjok tho ti han tarlan te kha alomom le in ka khia ten tuna finding enan soitak point pa roke mokha ngai nom zualin ka khia khang ka chu soi zui talovila nakina kan zir belle tura hei khami nu malan na tur ka chu sani somni pathum vel thule la hian achiang inarin oma chunga chuan mi pui tual zal nun kha eng angin nge thak danglam ti te po mu chua tel tum ta ila ni danga mizo ti chu in len po dual kan nia thenoma in lut ton reng kan ni khatiang ti kha thak danglamim ti te ni tina ei chop zong down to den kan ti ho khatiang voice ati kha heng kan thule la hian alang telim tuna mi kan nei chena hian langim ti te po kha zirtel ta ila athavia ome ten chu baka literary genre rang alo piang ani ti te khana kin history apo la zir kan la chuan tur le kan la soi fo tur zinga mi ani anga alo moma kangin an chuak te kha mi puilung oilo hemi covid tuar thiam lo ti mai la tuar na zual conflict kha eng angin nge a reflect eng angin nge heng thule la hian an lan ti ran tar lan ti po kha soitel ni ta silangin kan ti le huna chuan a tha khopanga atinga inom tu ponianga me che voice mo me po voice mo a eng po eng corner voice mo kha langi kana rin oma chung te po chu kan mu zel tura khan da taila tin in mu chu athilo mo tak mai chu hey international event kha he pandemic awanga alo tam ta ti kha ka thil thleng ang zela ke mani kan in siam rem zung adaptation kan nei that zia kha atilanga khang zong ti kha chun zom ilarem chang kha leize lila chung chuan eng angin nge kan thule la khan a che zonga hongemo ara chu emo ka ngong ka kan ti maya ngong ka impact influence ngong tiale mai po ola athena chona ngong ani anga athena chon ra chwa ti poni anga e khatiang ang chi kha kanjir le huna chuan ti bil le taila kha soi chiang boka kan movik boka tlang puya chuan a tha thokhatani lo mani le tin kan komen ange kalome
Pudarte kan lo me ka comment lawa nga kasi lo bok nen amay ro su it's always wonderful to see the Miso department taking opportunities to produce and publish more researches, and I hope that there will be more researches on the way. And now for the last department to make presentation tonight, I call on the Department of History. The presenters are Dr. Rosalind Barsangzwali and Dr. Robert Lalsangkima.
Good evening to our efficient chairperson, Dr. Lalsangkima, our esteemed guest, Professor Lalsangkima Pachuau, my colleagues and other participants. My laptop has given me away, so I think my colleague, Dr. Robert, will be helping me with the presentation, with the screen sharing. And this evening, we would like to talk about our presentation, a paper that we have submitted, which is titled "A Brief History of the Epidemic: Compilation of Documents and Impact of COVID-19 in Mizoram." Since a lot of our participants have decreased, we will try and make it as short as possible. So I would like to introduce by saying that as part of this huge project that the research cell has taken up, the Department of History has decided to work under two themes. At the beginning, we were a little hesitant because since, history writing always particularly entails, things which have already been done. However, with COVID-19, which is an ongoing pandemic, we have looked at the huge impact that it has on the economy, political, social life, and agriculture, along with its allied sectors, etc. And with advancement in technology, we realize that a lot can be done. And so, and also because students were to be involved, and with the dearth of time, the Department of History has decided to work on two themes, as shown in the screen: documentation, which is a collection and compilation of official information and notifications published by the government and local task forces and village level task forces for a period of 1 year from March 2020 to March 2021. And the other theme is on the brief study of the history of epidemics in Mizoram. And here I would like to talk about the importance of documentation. And the second theme would be talked to you by would be from my colleague, Dr. Robert Lalsangkima, who has contributed to a major part of the content, especially of the second theme of our paper. And so documentation is very important because it helps in understanding the narratives for decisions and response, and it also aids in scientific studies and researches. It is important to record information that can help support such plans, further research, hypothesis, solutions, and the reckoning and interpretation of such services. Also, it also aids in, like I said, scientific studies and researches, which we can come up with, or with which we can come up with conclusive ideas and solutions. And another important point why we have taken up documentation as a part of this project is because documentation is an important historical tool. So however imperceptible it may be, there's no doubt that it serves as an important source of knowledge, study, and investigation in the future. And so as for the methodology, we could not really come up with a singular academic methodology. Students of 6th semester were divided into 5 groups. They were assigned a time period of 3 or 4 months each to cover, for which they were to collect documents and come up with a summary of their own. For example, one group would be assigned to collect data from between, for example, March to May and so on to cover the time period. And then we have, even though there is, uniformity in methodology is crucial, in the dearth of time and space, and also in transigent periods, students were advised to follow any form of collective effort convenient to them in collecting their work. It is because of this that the data as in its crude form has not been submitted, yet it is still with us. And for the first part of our theme, for which I'm speaking, with very little done as compared to other social researchers, we have drawn certain conclusions. And this research, therefore, do not come under any categorization as neither qualitative nor quantitative. This should also explain the different types of methods used by the students, which was convenient to them. However, the compilation, editing, and analysis of the scripts were done by concerned professors. So on that note, I would like to bring to light a little bit of information which we have accumulated and on which, based on which data we have brought out a very short overview for tonight. So according to the data that were collected, the first outbreak, which happened on 27th of June 2020, we had a total number of cases, 148 cases, including 93 active cases. So this was the first outbreak, which came right after the return of people working outside the state, not just Miso, but people from Mizoram working outside the states. And then on 10th September, we saw there were 141 new cases which were confirmed on a single day. And this was the highest till this date. This was the highest single day outbreak, with a total number of cases coming up to 1,333, including 583 active cases. And this was the second outbreak of COVID in the year 2020. And the third outbreak happened in the late of October last year with the opening of government offices and schools and hotels. The total number of cases was 3,710, including 502 active cases. And because of this, the government have come up with a solution in which they felt that there should be a no tolerance drive. And so in order to break the community transmission, which everybody, even the scientists, along with our doctors and frontline workers together, decided that was the main reason for the outbreak, the state government decided to conduct COVID-19 no tolerance fortnight from 26 November 2021, 26 November 2020. I think I've made a mistake here. So this is an overview. And from this date, what happened was that we have been under perpetual lockdown since then. And because of that, there were a lot of changes which were happening in the state. And this change was seen in the continuous lockdown had created a lot of turmoil. It has created a lot of chaos in the life of people, and it was shown very vividly in the economic sector, as shown by the data that we have collected. And so there was a lot of destabilization of socioeconomic status, especially in agriculture and the allied sectors. We have seen that micro and small scale industries, informal sectors, including traders, hotels, restaurant, repair services, transport and communication, construction works were halted. And those in manufacturing, especially garment, to be specific, tailors and the likes, and daily wages were the people who were affected the most. And there was a number of shift, a total shift, let's say, a total shift from social activities to more personal activities and indoor activities. And social connections were shunned, as it happened, as we have experienced earlier in the pre-COVID period. And these connections were done mostly through social media, social networking, digital communication became the new normal, and sharing of talents and ideas and any kind of sharing at all had to be done through social networking and technology. And there was a disruption of supply chain. There was a lot of labor shortages, and there was a lot of uncertainty in harvesting and in also in the process of production. And so this led to a lot of instability in market price due to continuous lockdown. Hence, livestock industry is expected to be hit harshly as well. And so this is a very, we have, a number of other socio-economic and political consequences because of the lockdowns, because of COVID-19. But as we know, and as our previous presenters have, surely highlighted, all these can become later on a part of the historical study. And so these are interesting time, however hard it may be. And as a Department of History, going back, we would like to, highlight the history of, epidemics in Mizoram. And so these, besides these numerous consequences, now let's briefly hear, if you please, about the second theme from Dr. Robert Lalrem Tuangaralte. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vari. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
All right. Okay. I think I have around 6 to 7 minutes, so we'll talk in brief. Okay. The topic under study is epidemics in Mizo history, a short historical survey. The Lusai or Mizo, like most hill dwellers, usually settled in the mountain or higher altitude and avoid plain areas. For them, plain areas were considered as taboo, manifested by illness and diseases. According to folk tales and legends, Mizo in pre-colonial society witnessed some of the diseases or epidemics, but plague was unknown in pre-colonial Mizo society. Certain diseases like measles, typhoid, diphtheria, yellow fever, and cholera were unknown in the hills before the arrival of foreigners or Europeans. Now let me talk a little bit about the indigenous practices. As we can see from the screen, if the epidemic broke out, the inhuman practices of deserting and segregation of the sick persons helped them to overcome the disaster. The appearance of cholera or any similar disease in the village was taken as a signal to evacuate a village. In some places, a contagious person are abandoned in a jungle or are secluded in a zoom huts until they expired. Besides, in order to contain the spread of disease, the neighboring village usually perform Shridite by closing their entrance or gate with the infected village. This practice enabled them to quarantine themselves or lock down, in today's language, from the spread of disease. There are many things to talk about, but let me highlight two diseases, that is the smallpox and cholera from the colonial writings. The most contagious disease like cholera and smallpox were unknown to many Mizos before the advent of outsiders in the hills. One of the earliest records of smallpox in Mizoram can be found from the writing of T.H. Lewin. It was in the year 1860 that the Lusai contracted smallpox when they raided Kosala Bazar, Chittagong in Bangladesh. And then regarding cholera, T.H. Lewin mentioned, quote, in 1861, when some Mizo chief invaded Bengali village in Chittagong Hill Tract, they took back cholera with them. This disease terrorized so much so that numbers of the Lusais put an end to their existence by suicide, unquote. And then during the Lusai expedition, 1871 to 72, and then Tsin Lusai expedition 1889 to 1890, there were reports of many sickness suffered by the British officers, native troops, transport coolies, etc. It is learned from the colonial source that majority of the illness or disease infected persons were the colonial contingents who diligently campaigned with huge amount of coolies and other supplies. In such a scenario of displacement of humans who constantly move across uncharted terrain with different climatic conditions, they easily become vulnerable and disease vectors. Due to this reason, the Misos naturally do not welcome the Europeans. It is said that when Mr. Place, who is the SDO of Hailakandi district, visited the hills to inquire about the bamboo famine reliefs in 1881, the Mizo chiefs welcomed him only with friendliness. Mackenzie recorded that the Mizo believes on the ground that, quote, Englishmen who visit is believed to be generally followed by cholera. And in our paper, we also discuss about the worst epidemic in Mizo history, that is the outbreak of smallpox in Trangtuinek in the year 1919, and the Spanish influenza that spread in Munpui, near Lempi village and Sensip town. However, due to the paucity of time, we don't have time to discuss here, and we hope that the hard copy will be coming out soon and everyone can read later. And with that, let me move to the concluding part, the conclusion. Within subsequent years of colonial rule, the indigenous practice of Tridai Teo and the work of Bolpu were not effective with these alien diseases. So people desperately consulted colonial missionaries for medical help. With these circumstances, colonial government intelligently used consultation with medical practitioner as a moment for preaching the gospel to the natives. Therefore, the colonial medicine worked perfectly in spreading up the evangelization process to one level, and the colonial medicine or the scientific medicine became instrumental for the colonization process at another level. Long before the advent of colonial power in the hills, Mizo society, as primitive as they are, performed social distancing and quarantining the villages in order to flatten the curve of infections. The practice of segregation and isolation of the infected persons enabled them to prevent the spread of disease to the masses. Though the world improved in science and technology in recent years, and rapid advancement in the field of medical sciences, in particular, these indigenous practices or knowledge still remain practical and have validity even century later in battle against COVID-19. With this, we conclude our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rosalind. Thank you, Dr. Robert. Thank you for the historical perspective on the COVID-19 pandemic. And now I call on Pungu Lalsangkima to give his expert comment.
Good evening, everybody. Respected Chairperson, Dr. Lal Birzwali, and respected keynote speaker, Professor Lalsangkima, and respected principal, and my dear colleague. Today, this evening, I've been given the chance to give a comment on what my department has given or presented a paper. Actually, the time is not right for giving such a long comment, and because it's too long and some might have been feeling quite drowsy and it may be very boring. So let me just give as short as possible. So the Department of History has presented a brief history of
the epidemic, that means COVID pandemic 2019. And the period of their research covers up to March 2021. And had they do research further, then the result would be much different from what they have just discovered now. Anyway, it's quite interesting to hear such a what you call paper. It is informative and it is rather interesting to hear. So I congratulate my colleague, Dr. Rosalind Varsawazwadi and Dr. Robert Lalrem Tuanga for preparing such a very nice paper. With this few words, let me conclude my speech. Thank you and good night, all of you.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed brief, but it was also very interesting. And now, everyone, let's come to the most important part, that is the vote of thanks. I call on Dr. Eshla Zuithangi to give the vote of thanks.
Hello once again. So now we're at the final part of our webinar, and gratitudes have to be said, and because it is felt. So good evening once again, respected principal, faculties, and the participants of this seminar. Firstly, I would like to say that it has been a pleasure being a part of this webinar. This webinar has been planned, and it is a privilege to witness it materialize this evening. For that, I would first like to thank God Almighty for giving us this opportunity. And now I would like to thank our keynote speaker, Lalsangkima Pachuau, for accepting our invitation and taking time to deliver a wonderful, knowledgeable, and insightful keynote speech on COVID-19. I would like to express my deep gratitude to our principal, Lalsangkima Pachuau, our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Lalbiak, our chairperson tonight, our coordinator, Research and Consultancy, for planning and making this webinar happen this evening. And to all our distinguished speakers and researchers for making an excellent presentation and making this webinar meaningful and interesting. For without them, this would not have been a success. And last but not the least, I would like to thank everyone participating this evening. And I would like to invite you all again to join us tomorrow at 7:30, same time. And good night to you all. And